Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the ICC Sisters podcast, where we help our Muslim community develop a balanced mind and lifestyle. My name is Namira, and I am the activity and events coordinator for the ICC Sisters Halakha, as well as one of the graphic designers for the podcast. Because of our guest's professional background in entrepreneurship, I am very excited to host today's episode since I am studying at John Molson School of Business and I'm very interested in entrepreneurship. Welcome, Mariam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair for making it today. We're also glad to have you in our podcast. I remember seeing one of your posts on Instagram a couple years ago related to Bill 21 in Quebec, which prohibits people from wearing religious symbols at work in certain positions like teacher in public elementary schools, judges, and police officers. Since you graduated in education, you were unfortunately targeted by this law. I found it interesting how you seized this opportunity to your advantage. So let's start by diving more into who you are.
I always found the question of introducing ourselves so interesting about where to start and who we are. So I think at this point in my life, I'm very much a self-development junkie, entrepreneur, mom, really wearing a bunch of different hats that make me who I am, as also the entrepreneur that I am. So if you're looking at my professional life, really how I would identify myself as an overbooked copywriter that is now a business coach. We focus in my business on three main aspects. So we have people come in that are brand new to entrepreneurship. They're like, hey, I just want to become an entrepreneur. I just want an idea. And they go into our certification, which is a copywriting certification. Then we have a marketing program, which is all about how to use copy and how to use content to be able to grow your business. And then I also work with people one-on-one who are they are successful in their business, but they want to continue growing and they want to automate more of their business and they just want to keep scaling, inshallah.
That's very interesting. Can you tell us a bit more about copywriting? I'm very interested in copywriting.
Yeah, so copywriting is super fun. That's where I started. So copywriting is writing for companies to help them sell. That's at the core of what it is. So if you think about opening your email and you have a bunch of different emails from companies being this new product is out there, or any basically company that's sending you an email, it's written by a copywriter. If you're looking at social media for companies, etc., that's also typically written by a copywriter. Ads, basically almost everything under the sun that we see a lot of times when we're on our phones are often written by copywriters.
So a lot of marketing and promotional material.
Yes, exactly. So copywriting is obviously the promotional material, but it also goes everything that's related to sale is automatically copywriting, but a lot of times it's also more holistic, right? So a YouTube video can be scripted by a copywriter. Okay. And then there's the avert sale, and then there's the building towards the sale.
Okay. So it can be behind the scenes as well.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
Need to be what we see on billboards and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And what were the challenges you faced during your career development?
Yeah, so when I look at where I was in my career, so as you mentioned, I was a teacher. And what I found was really interesting in my experience, and this is in hindsight, what I think was the challenge. At that time, I thought the challenge was very much Bill 21. But now in hindsight, I find that the challenge that I experienced was essentially not giving space to the Muslim experience in the workplace. So what I mean exactly by that is that a lot of times we talk a lot about inclusion, right? Inclusion is this big word in our society of we have to include everyone. And then what it means somehow did not include the Islamic experience, the Muslim experience. We were all about accepting everyone and be who you are. And that was something that as a teacher, I obviously always told my students, be who you are, embrace who you are, etc. But then somehow that didn't include being Muslim, right? As soon as it was this line of oh, am I too Muslim, right? Constantly, right?
Yeah. Of course.
You've experienced that?
Of course, I have. In schools, we aren't even given an acknowledgement for Eid, Ramadan at all. The fact that we have to constantly remind them that we have to take a day off for this day because it's our religious holiday.
And it's in the curriculum. If you look at the government website, Islamic holidays do appear on their calendar, which is really interesting because if you actually look at the QEP, it also includes Islam. And so I think knowing is a really big part of what we need to do as Muslims, knowing our rights, knowing, exactly. All the information around what you can do, because it's definitely challenging. And a lot of people would just be like this year, a lot of the ministry exams fell on Eid al-Adha. And, knowing that you can ask whether or not, at the end you do get that capacity to not take it or to take it later. Like just asking, I think a lot of Muslims struggle with. And I think that comes from the fact that we're constantly trying to be less Muslim. Like I can't appear as Muslim as I want to be. Yet we're constantly telling everyone else, like, be exactly who you are. Like wear whatever you want to wear. We accept everything. Well, you're not really accepting everything. You're really accepting what falls under a specific box. And if you want to value inclusion needs to be for everyone. And that is where my struggle really became an internal struggle in the workplace, where I was like constantly trying to be less Muslim. And the tipping factor was a mom came up to me and was like, oh my gosh, if everyone wore their scarf like you do, we wouldn't have to have Bill 21. And that's when I decided that I wasn't going to stay a teacher in that moment. And the reason for that is I had constantly like reduced how overtly hijabified my hijab was. Like, obviously I don't want to like share sins or anything like that, but the idea of just like, you know, you could wear, like today I'm wearing like a black dress, and like that would have been like way too hijabified in like for what I felt was like accepted in that culture. And I was like, wow, like I'm constantly telling people to be themselves, yet I can't find the space within myself to be who I want to be, right?
You weren't comfortable enough to do it.
Exactly.
And then what helped you overcome these sort of challenges that you were facing at the time?
I think what helped me overcome was leaving. And I like, honestly, I think like, I think a lot about how in Islam we're so constantly told to look at who we surround ourselves with. And I don't think I realized to which extent. I always used to pride myself over the fact that like everyone around me is like so different from each other. Like you would never know if you met my friends, like who I am. Right. And that's not to say that I don't believe in like friendships that could be positive friendships with people that are different. Like that's not the point that I'm trying to make, but I am trying to make the point that like sometimes we think that we're in an environment that is so different than us and we're the positive influence in that environment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the influence is in two ways, right? Like if you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to sit in this group of people and like, you know, I'm thinking of an example that's more teenager-y because like, obviously I'm thinking about the time that I was a high school teacher, but like, it's kind of like that comment that I would get sometimes from some of my students that were, you know, more practicing or that were Muslim. And they were like, oh, miss, you know, like, I know that I'm like hanging out with all these people that are smoking and doing all these things, but like, I don't do it. And like, maybe they won't do it too. But at the end of the day, you are shifting slowly a little bit who you are to fit that group, whether that be that you're okay with saying a bad word, for example, in that setting, it becomes normalized. And I think at the kind of like the larger scale of things of like being an employee in a place that doesn't accept Muslims, whether or not some of my colleagues did, is that you're constantly influenced to become less and less you to be able to fit into this group. So for me, I needed to leave to find myself again. I was like not able to voice the opinions that I actually had because I was constantly scared of like having someone be like, oh, but like, you know, you're Muslim and you're trying to influence people or whatever it is. And I was also just constantly really shying away from stepping into my rights, right? Like, I don't want to create friction. I don't want to create any disagreement. I even wouldn't go into pictures with staff members because I was afraid that like someone would see my picture that I'm wearing the hijab and like would call the school. So like I became less of who I was. So I needed to leave that system to be able to embrace who I was fully.
Okay, that makes sense because the environment that you were in for sure makes a difference to you as a person. I get why you had to leave that environment to become better.
I think we tend to compliment people for sometimes becoming more like in tune with something that's more normative in the society. So an example of that is like is someone removing their hijab even and then being like, oh my gosh, your hair is so beautiful. So you're like kind of, and I'm not saying that's like you shouldn't be super kind to your friend, but I'm saying sometimes we tend to make someone feel good for something instead of being like, hey, like, you know, like are you okay? You know, like, and I'm not saying that it's right for everyone, but I also think that we need to be very mindful of us like making someone feel like doing something away from Islam is actually a positive thing, right? And I'm giving the extreme of removing the hijab, but it could also be like, you know, suddenly the person's wearing outfits that are less modest and you're like, oh my God, you're slaying. Like, you look so beautiful. Like, and you're constantly doing that, but you're not doing it when they're like wearing modest clothing. And I know for me, that was a part of it, where I felt like, you know, a lot of people around me, the lesser I looked Muslim, were like, oh my gosh, you look so beautiful. Like, you look amazing. And, you know, like, we are human, and there is an element of like, I like receiving this compliment, right? I like feeling that type of way. And, you know, and at the time I was obviously looking to get married since I was like in my early 20s. And there was also this thing of like constantly being like, oh, like, you can't look like that if you want to like get married. And it's so interesting how like those things shift, because then afterwards it's like, oh, but like, you also can't look like this if you want to get married. It's like all these things that are like these rules that people have to abide by to want to find a significant other. But I do want to touch on that point as well, because I do fully disagree with it, because you're going to attract like who you are. So if you think that you need to remove your hijab or to look a certain way to attract a significant other, that's a significant other you're attracting.
Yeah, exactly. If you want a person that it has the same values as you, you need to stand for those values and need to be who you are from the start.
Absolutely. I know that's such a tangent from like talking about business, but I was like, wait, this is important.
Okay. If we're gonna come back to like the topic of entrepreneurship, what role did Islam play in your decision to becoming an entrepreneur?
I genuinely feel like it was 100% of the decision in like a lot of ways, because I just felt, so actually it's twofold, but they're both Islamic related. So the first aspect was that I felt like I felt myself slipping. Like I felt like I was starting to feel, and that's why that comment was like the moment I decided to leave, because I was like, oh my gosh, like it's also from the outside, people could see me as less Muslim. That means something is slipping, something is wrong, right? And that's when I decided to leave. So it was the fact that I felt like my Islam was starting to slip, right? Like I felt like I was now conforming and therefore not defying, right? Like I wasn't like staying there in order to prove that I could wear my hijab there, et cetera, et cetera. I was starting to like to slip. I had developed a very severe anxiety because of the whole situation. And I had also had a personal loss at that time. So I was also starting to get like sick. I would actually like puke between classes, and like, I was working in a very white environment. And so there were a lot of times like students that would be like, oh, you know, I was talking to my mom and like, we're not sure if you're still allowed to be here. And like, my mom said this. And so I just like started having a lot of anxiety. And I do think that the way to also overcome anxiety, obviously sometimes we need medication, etc. For me, I was prescribed medication, but what really helped me was like really going back to Islam and also removing stressing factors, which were at the time like my job. And then the other factor in which Islam played a huge role is that the question I asked myself was, what does my life look like now? Like if I leave teaching, and this was something I always envisioned myself as, I was supposed to for them to pay for a master's for me to go into being more an admin role. I was like, okay, if this is gone, like, who am I? Like, I feel like, and that's why, like, when you asked me in the beginning, like, who am I? Like, I feel like I've detached that answer so much from just like, I feel like before I would always answer, like, I'm a teacher. Right? I'm a teacher, I'm a wife, I'm this. And it's like automatically those are the things that form your identity. Versus now I think I've detached that a lot of like, it's not necessarily what you do or what you provide society. It's also like what you feel, who you are, like being Muslim, like all of those things are like a huge part of our identities. And for me, it was like I needed something that was able to balance that, like me being Muslim to what I desired, maybe not where I was at that time, but who like the Muslim I wanted to be with a job. And I couldn't see it. Like I couldn't see like where I would go, because I also felt like I wanted something that allowed me to be a very present mom, because I knew I wanted to become a mom. And so a lot of jobs are very grind like, right? They're very like grinding, work a 9 to 9.
I feel like teachers are for sure grinding so hard. Like they're 9 to 5, but I'm told that they're also expected to do like a lot of work behind the scenes as well, like after hours, because they have to plan a lot of like lessons and stuff like that. I'm not sure if that was the case for you.
Oh yeah, 100%. Plus I was like extracurricular everything, which is also why I was so upset. I was like, okay, like you're not going to promote me and I'm like doing so much. Like, but I also felt like I could see myself having kids as a teacher, because you have your summers off and you kind of finish at the same time as kids and stuff like that. And I didn't see that elsewhere. And then I had basically I had already started working with a coach to publish a book at the time. And so I spoke to her about it and I was like, I want to leave. Like, how can I monetize right away my skill sets and leave? And that's when she was like, well, you're a great writer. Why don't you look into copywriting? And so it was her idea. And I looked into it, fell in love with it. And so for me, like, it played a huge role because it was about being able to live my most authentic Muslim life while having a job, because it was very, very career driven. I still am, but I'm very much a workaholic in recovery. But I was very much like all about work, and a lot of my self-identity and self-worth came from my job.
Okay. So like leaving that negative and like work environment is kind of what propelled you into entrepreneurship automatically. It was because you needed that work-life balance. You needed to be able to feel like you didn't have to like worry about what the other people were thinking, and being authentically Muslim and yourself.
Yeah, because like I feel like anything, like I already was so inspired by Khadija radiallahu anha growing up. Like, I love doing things differently. I'm a very loud person in a lot of ways. And so, growing up in a predominantly South Asian environment, like being more of a louder person is not necessarily looked upon as a positive thing. And so it was one of those things where I was like, but Khadija radiallahu anha did all these things. And like, she was kind of like opposite of a lot of what South Asian culture tells us to be as a woman, I find, in certain aspects of it.
No, that's very true. A lot of South Asian cultures do not necessarily align with the cultures of Islam, I think.
I agree with that. And I think it's like very disempowering sometimes to be always told like you need to be silent, you need to agree with everyone's opinion, you can't really, cause friction. Like
kind of be like a people pleaser.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think I stayed as long as I did because of me being a people pleaser. I think there's a lot of things in my life that I needed to let go of, because also when I started I think being an entrepreneur is a lot more fashionable, so to speak, right now. When I started, it was not. And so a lot of people around me were like, why would you ever do that? And I still think a lot of people will say not to do it.
About 6 years ago, you said?
Yeah, I started 6 years ago. So in 2018, it was either 2017 or 2018 when I started. So yeah, it was like, most people were just like, why would you ever do that? Like, you're not going to make money. Like, you're not going to be successful. You're going to see after a year, you're going to want to go back to teaching. Like, just like being like, basically saying that I was like harming my financial stability, my capacity to be. But at the end of the day, you know who you are and you know what you want to become. And what I always tell my clients because this happens to still my clients, I don't think it's something that is just in the 2018 timeframe, but like a lot of times when a client starts working with me, especially in the copywriting program, because they're brand new entrepreneurs, they'll be like, oh, my family's telling me I can't do it. And the thing I always tell them is that someone telling you can't do it is a reflection of what they believe about themselves, not a reflection of what they believe about you. So if someone comes up to you and is like, oh, you cannot make like 6 figures, let's say, right? That's what they believe about themselves. It has nothing to do with what they actually believe about you. So it's like their own belief. If I can't do it, how can someone else do it? Like, that's how the brain works, right? And so like whenever someone tells us, oh, you can't do this, or you're not going to be successful doing this, it's like what they believe for themselves.
Like, a lot of people discourage themselves before even trying. They give up before even trying. They're like, I can't do this. It's like, it's too risky, or I won't be able to do it. Which I feel like you should believe in yourself a little more. You should believe in what your skill set and your capabilities, and you should give yourself a chance to do whatever it is that you want to do professionally.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. I think it's also interesting because like belief takes you so far, right? And I think a lot of times like people will say they tried, but when you really ask them like, okay, but like what did you do to try? It's like you could wish and you could hope and you could believe, but like you actually need to take action that supports that. And it's the same thing in Islam, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, I want to pray Salah and I want to pray Fajr, but not put an alarm on,
exactly. Exactly.
Like it's like, it doesn't make sense. Like those two, like you need to desire something, but you need to tie your camel too. So if like you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, like I really want to become an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, what are you doing to create that path for yourself? Like, are you learning, right? Ilm is so important. Are you working on your character to be able to do that? Are you like, what are you actively doing to be able to get the result? Because I can guarantee you that it's not just by opening up an Instagram page and being like, I now bake, that you're not going to become an entrepreneur, right? And then to be like, oh, it didn't work, that means it doesn't work, is like putting kind of like the cart before the horse, right? Like you need to really think about, what is it that I need to learn to be able to be successful? Like what do I need to do to be able to be successful? And then actually take those steps. Like to summarize, the role that Islam played in me deciding to become an entrepreneur is 1, to protect my faith, but 2, also because I could not fathom or could not find in that time space like a job that actually allowed me to not only like protect my Islamic values and to pray 5 times a day and to like wear the hijab the way that I wanted, but that also aligned with the life that I wanted to build. And I wanted to become like a very present mom. I wasn't married at that time, but it was something that I knew that I wanted, which I do think also comes from my Islamic values, that I wanted to be able to hold all those things together.
And so how was your experience growing your business as a Muslim woman?
It was challenging in ways that I didn't think it would be challenging, and easier in ways that I thought would be more difficult. So to kind of like explain that in more depth, like I felt like, the hardest part is going to be like to learn the things, like learn the strategy, etc. And obviously that has its challenges, but those were expected challenges. What I didn't expect would be as difficult is really aligning my Muslim values with my business, because the whole reason I had started, this business was to align with my Muslim values. And the reason it was so difficult is I think that a lot of what perpetuates in like the typical like 9 to 5 also perpetuates a lot of times in entrepreneurial culture. So when I started working with a business coach at the time, it was very much like grind life, right? It was very much like, if you don't do this, you don't really want it, right? There was also a lot of things that didn't align with my personal values, which might still align with someone's Muslim values, but things like showing up in a certain way online, constantly posting on social media, constantly showing my personal life, constantly posting on stories, right? It creates a certain thing that for me felt misaligned. And so those were big challenges that I had to face. It was also a space, and it's still a space where I'm at now. It's very hard to find like Muslims or like Muslim coaches that can help me in specific things that I'm looking for. So I constantly have to like take what they say and then divide it into what I believe is right and then what I need to let go of. And that's why now I work specifically with Muslim women, because I felt like I needed to create something that like a Muslim woman could be like, okay, yeah, this aligns with me 100%, because I don't feel like that exists. And I do think that that is the biggest challenge that I had to face when starting my business, was really making sure that I didn't create another job for myself. Like I didn't create another, something I wanted to leave again, but I actually created something that was 100% aligned with who I am and my Islamic values, and like didn't push me to become less of who I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. It is like, I think, better for yourself to be surrounded by a group of Muslim women instead of like you said, other people, because they would give you values that don't align with your own, which would create like too much conflict, and it would only like make you kind of discourage you or make it even more difficult for you to pursue your business. So being surrounded by like a group of Muslim women that encourage you to stay true to your values is very important.
100%. Yeah. And I think that like it's, where I'm at in my business, it's kind of like utopic. Like it's not something that's easy to find. I haven't found that for myself, but it's something that I'm building for others. And what I really focused on afterwards, like after my first experience, was like hiring people as like my coach, or like working with people in a way where I'm like, okay, you might not be Muslim, but do our values align, right? And if you're able to find someone that's Muslim, like amazing, right? Because like a lot of times now what I'm looking for are like very specific things. I think there are a lot more Muslims entering the space, and feminine energy is also very different than masculine energy. So sometimes you might find, like male coaches, but you might not align with them, or you might not feel like as safe, I want to say, because I do think there is something to say about, the Muslim experience, and there's also something to say about the woman's experience, right? The way that typically a male will like build a business is different than how a woman, like I was pregnant while I was scaling my business. That was a different experience than a lot of men can understand, right? And so like all of those things play a role. And so, picking someone, I think, to help you that understands who you are as a human, your values, and if you're able to, someone who's Muslim makes it just so much easier because the values will align so much quicker. I think is like really, really important.
Like now that you said it, that is a completely different aspect, like being a woman in entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur, because like, yeah, like you said, like pregnancy, marriage. There's so many different aspects that I think a woman is expected to like juggle while having your own business that I don't think men are.
And also just automatically what comes from being a male, I find, right? Because like even like the hijab component is not something that a male will understand, right? Like they could say, oh, I empathize. But like I think sometimes it's talked about as such like a banal issue that like that, oh yeah, you just, you know, you should be able to wear, you know, hijab in the workforce, or, you know, this should be easy for you. Don't you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But like those are real problems that women face that men do not typically have to.
I don't think they completely will understand the concept of modesty from our eyes.
Yeah.
Because it's something that they will never have to, like the challenge is not something that they will ever have to go through. Therefore, they will not have to like understand it from our perspective. They can never understand it from our perspective.
Yeah, I don't think they can. I think a lot of women issues are very specific to women. And like, I think there's certain things that I dealt with specifically because I was a woman, even when I started working specifically with Muslims. So now I only work with Muslim women, and it's not like a coincidence that I started working specifically only with Muslim women. One of the reasons too that I started working specifically with Muslim women is I felt like there was a difficulty sometimes for male to take female criticisms, right? There's like a lot of different issues that may come up, and so I don't think that it's like always positive to just be like, I want to work with a woman, or I don't think it's always positive to just like, I want to work with a Muslim, even if you're seeking knowledge that maybe that person doesn't have. However, I think it's important to know where you feel most like your problems could be understood, where someone can be like, you know, I actually understand that it could be challenging to want to have a child and want to build a business and be maybe not just for 9 months, like was unfortunately my case, right? And so like, it's like all of those different things I think there's a human experience, and then finding someone that is, you know, closest to your personal experience, I think helps as well.
So to summarize, it was like while you were growing your business, you were kind of searching for people that aligned with your values, whether that be Muslim women or just any woman in general who...
So I wasn't able to find a Muslim woman, and that's a distinction that I'm trying to make, is that I do believe that like the best advice I could give is to try to find someone that is a Muslim woman, but like that's why I'm like trying to make the distinction between the fact that when I started I could not find someone, right? Like there wasn't someone who had built what I desired to build that was Muslim. That just didn't exist. Maybe it did and I didn't find it, but it definitely wasn't something that existed in what I was trying to build. So I found someone that was the closest to that, meaning that she had values that aligned with mine. She didn't believe in the grind life. She wanted a balance. She wanted to have a family. Like she was very much someone, she was also ethnic, which totally helps because there's like that component of like understanding. She was an immigrant, which like she was able to, like, I'm not an immigrant, but she was, which also helps like identify certain issues that I was facing, if that makes sense. And I was able to bring up things like Islam with her in a way. And I was building a business for, like, now I'm building a business for Muslim women. When I started, it wasn't that. But in certain spaces, it might feel really uncomfortable to be like, oh, I want to talk about like how you build a business. Like I want aligning it with God, right? That's not something that's safe to say in every space. And so what I'm trying to iterate is like the difference between the advice of what I'm giving now of like, hey, try to find as much someone who is closest to your values, versus how my biggest struggle was like being able to find that, which I never did, but I had to still like go through and be like, okay, like this doesn't align with my values, so I won't take it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but your advice is coming from your past experience.
Exactly.
Of, like,
yeah.
The difficulty of finding people that
even now, by the way, like we just hired someone recently, and I couldn't find someone that was Muslim and had what I needed. I just couldn't, because like, and it's just like there's certain, inshallah, in the next 10 years there will be, but like I don't think that is, depending on where you are and what knowledge gap you're trying to seek, there's not always the opportunity to hire someone that's Muslim.
Yeah, it definitely is difficult. Like having Muslim entrepreneurs that work with Muslim women, it's like, it is kind of difficult to find nowadays. So you were talking about your experience as a Muslim woman growing your business, and it must have been difficult juggling like being a mom, being a business coach, and like as a business coach, you are other people's like sort of support system, but what do you do to support yourself and support your well-being?
That's such a great question, because I think it's often like left to the side of like supporting ourselves. The first thing is I always have more than one coach typically. I usually have 3 at the same time for different aspects. So there's like the strategy component, but then there's also like the mental space that you need to work on. I mentioned at the beginning I was a self-development junkie. I really do mean it. It's kind of a problem at this point, but I think like really healing yourself, whether that be, by having the support around you, but also learning strategies for your mental well-being. So like for me right now, breath work is a big thing. It also helps me with focusing in salah, right? I think Islam is a huge part of like our support system. We have so much support system built into our religion that we need to use, including just like breaking while, working to pray. One of the things that I recently did was also like print out like basically the dua to start work and put it on my office desk, like right away when I start, like you're renewing your intention basically. Apart from that, I think a huge part of my support is literally my husband. Like he is like the best person in the world. And when I first started and I met him, I was like, hey, this is what I'm starting. This is what I'm building. And he was so supportive around that. And I think we talked about like, the naysayers before. And so like the flip side of support is like, yes, have the people that help you with actually building your business, have the people that help you with your mindset and all of that. Make sure your salah, your iman is your biggest support no matter what, right? Because like there's going to be ups and downs in your business. But then there's also the people around you, right? We talked about that literally from like, becoming more Muslim or, being able to like be practicing more, but that also comes with being positive around your business, right? If you're constantly around the people that are like, you're going to fail, you're going to do wrong, and this is a horrible idea, you start internalizing it the same way as if you're around people that are like, you're going to do amazing. Like whatever you want to build, you can build, like make dua for it. Like all of these different things, like that will also help. So definitely my support system is my husband, my friends, and always coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously first. But I do also think that surrounding ourselves with the right people is like literally the most important thing.
People often forget to use Islam as a support system. Yeah. Whereas it should be the first thought that comes into mind. Like when you're going through it, like no matter what, like you're going through, whether it be like your like studies, whether it be starting your own business, if you're going through like a lot and you're mentally like you feel overwhelmed, I feel like a lot of people should consider Islam. They have to consider Islam as the most important support system.
100,000,000%. Like I think I've done so many mindset courses and like all of these different things, and like subhanAllah, so many of the things they talk about are literally in our religion. Like they're literally in there. If there's one thing that I would recommend everyone starts doing, and this is something that I really, really focus on in my personal ibadah, is dua. Like literally like this, I think we often have a very and I say often have, but I literally am just talking about my past self, but like this idea of like finite resources, right? Like this idea that like everything is very restricted. Like, right, you could only have a certain amount. Like, let's say even financially, like, oh, everyone's making this amount of money. That's the amount of money that I can make, right? Versus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give us anything in the world.
Exactly. There's no bounds.
No bounds. And it could literally not even touch a little bit. Like, it doesn't even touch what he has. So I think we need to like up our dua game. And that's something that I consistently working on, right? Of like really up like what you ask for. And, I gave money as an example because I think it's more concrete. But even things like how many hours you work, like, I used to work like 40 hours when I started my business. I now work roughly 14 hours a week. I've literally had people be like, that's not possible, because they don't believe it's possible for themselves. That always comes back to the same thing, right? But that's something I asked dua for a long amount of time until I started finding ways to be able to do it. So even if something like you can't even fathom how it's possible, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it, because he's the one that will provide it for you. So really the support system in Islam, there's so many, but if I would need to pick one that I think is like the biggest, easiest also one to access, it's literally making dua.
And lastly, what would you like to say to our young sisters who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs?
I think, so the first question I would ask is actually, what do you want your life to look like? Forget about what you want your business to look like. Forget about what you want like your 9 to 5 to look like, if that's something you're considering. Just ask yourself, like, what do I want my life to look like? So when you wake up in the morning, like actually like script it. Like I'm a very big like journal person. Like I like to script things. And so like actually write out what like a perfect day would look like for you. And then see what kind of business, if you do decide to become a business owner, because I don't believe it's for everyone. I do think that in this society for Muslim women, it is the best choice. That's my personal belief. However, I don't think it's necessarily for everyone, if that makes sense, right? I think if you know what you want your life to look like, then you can actually start building a business that supports that life, right? I mentioned before how like I didn't want to just build another job for myself. And I think that's something that we often can automatically fall into as business owners. And so if you know that you want to build a business, okay, ask yourself, like, when do I want to wake up in the morning? Like, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to spend a lot of time like with people? How many hours a week do I want to be working? And then build a business that can support that style, that lifestyle.
That's very interesting because a lot of people build their business first and then think about like, how am I going to manage my life after I started this business? But thinking about that aspect of like, what life do you want to live? And then like developing into like, what ideas would I have for my business that would support this lifestyle is, I think, the best option, especially for us Muslim women, to like think about that first, our lifestyle and how we want to live our life before what business do we want to start. That's very interesting.
And especially like I think sometimes we think that the answer is after, like so you know, I mentioned that I have a son, and I started building my business to be able to like hold the fact that I had a child like 2 years before I got pregnant. So like, and I'm not saying that you need 2 years to create that space, but I was like, okay, I want to get pregnant. I don't know what that will look like. I want to have a child. I don't know how that will look like. So I needed to like move away at that time from like one-on-ones to groups of like people that I was supporting to be able to like give that space. So I always think like we need to start, it's the same thing as in Islam, right? We think about the end result that we want. Like I think we need to live our lives a lot from the perspective of death rather than the perspective of life, right? Like when we pass away, what will be, no one is like going to pass away and like, wished I had worked more. You might wish you had like impacted more. Mm-hmm. You might wish you had helped people more. You might wish that you spent more time with your family, but like material things are material things. So like, you're not going to like wish, oh, I really wish I would have bought that coat, or I really wish I would have, like, I don't feel like those are the things you think about, like, when you're, you know, facing death. And so like, if you can live your life based off of how you want to pass away, I think it's the same thing in your business. Like, how do you want to live your life is how we need to build things in reverse. Like, look at the end result mm-hmm. and then take the actions that bring us there.
Mm-hmm. You have to think about like, who do you want to impact? What changes do you want to make? And what type of positive change do you want to make? What is the purpose of you starting this business? And what change what will happen after you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's interesting because you're talking about purpose. And then there's also like how you want to live your day-to-day life, right? Because those are spheres. And I think like a lot of times when people start a business, we first have to meet our personal needs, right? So like, for example, like you mentioned that you're in school and et cetera. When you graduate, you're going to have financial needs that you need to meet for then you to be able to like share that, right? Like I know that like growing up, I had a lot of negative ideas around money. Right. And so like, it's like, first I had to overcome that and be like, okay, like I have enough money to self-sustain, etc. Now I could focus really on impacting and like helping people. And like, the more you have, the more you can give, the more you can give zakat, the more you can create resources for Muslims. And so like, I think it's like first finding out like your day to day, like what do you want it to look like? Then it's like, okay, what purpose do you want to have? And then it's like, okay, what impact can we create? And so like, I do think they're like layers.
Levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your suggestions. Where can people find you online?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, it's at Coach Mariam Aziz. And what I'll also do is I'll give you guys the link to a free class that I have on how to add copywriting as a revenue stream. It's really fun and there's a lot of juicy content in there, inshallah.
Thank you. And jazakallah for this informative discussion. And thank you, dear listeners, for listening until the end. We truly pray that this discussion can benefit you or someone else in your surrounding who needs to listen to it. Until our next episode, take care and assalamu alaikum.